Oh, hello there. I didn't see you there. Welcome to Owen Sound Fitness and Training. It's Josh. I'm here to give you a little run through of all of our Precor equipment because we asked and a few people wanted us to do this. So this is for all the people who maybe have been here a long time and don't quite know all the ins and outs. For people who are new here, who are maybe used to different machines or are new to a gym completely and have never used any of these machines. Just to kind of give you a good run through of how our machines work. I'll throw in a few little tips and tricks that I think make them a little more effective, and just kind of give you a good idea. So when we get back, you guys can just jump on and get going. So today will just be the Precor equipment, and then another day I'll do another post with some of the other stuff to be able to make everybody feel more comfortable once you're in. So we'll start off with our abdominal back extension. So this machine does 2 exercises. Number 1, abdominal, so it's basically a crunch machine. And then number 2, it's going to be a low back extension. So first things first, they are pretty self-explanatory in terms of where you sit because they all have seats, so sit on the seat. Second of all, you're going to choose whatever weight you feel. I'm just going to pick some random weight here. You push the pin in. One thing for all of these machines is they all have a little additional 5 pounds you can add. So most of them go up by 10 pounds, some go up by 15 depending. And if you see this little dude right here, when I push that in, that adds 5 pounds because there's a little 5-pound weight in behind that it grabs onto. And if you don't want the 5 pounds, pull it back out. With a couple of the other machines, which I'll show you once we get there, just because they're a slightly different style, it's actually a little lever you kind of push down and pull up. But that's how you do it. So I'm going to put the 5 pounds on just for fun. So I push it in. So now I would be at 75 pounds because I have it at 70 down here. So in terms of setting this machine, if you want to do the abdominal portion, you're going to set it to number 1 here, and you'll see there's a little arrow that shows the direction you'll be moving, and that's how you do the abdominal stuff. And then you have this little seat belt looking type thing here. You're just going to pull it nice and tight to you. Now for me personally, I don't like to hold the handles because I feel like they're really low. So I like to hold kind of up higher just so I can really keep my shoulder blades like pushed against the pad that's there. Get your feet wherever they're comfortable underneath any of these little guys. I like to put them just right underneath there just to make sure my lower body's not moving. And from there, holding this nice and tight, and then I'm just going to crunch down. So I'm trying to bring my ribs to my hips versus thinking I'm trying to go forward like this, which isn't really working my abs a whole lot. Like here, I'm more kind of using my hip flexors and just using my body weight versus thinking I'm trying to crunch straight down and basically collapse this area by crunching my ribs into my hips. Just making sure that the pad at the back stays on your shoulder blades the whole time versus kind of being loose from it, which isn't going to give you as much range. To do the opposite of that, more or less, is going to be the back extension. So there's 2 settings for this one. It's basically just based on what your mobility is to get down there. So if you can't lean forward a whole heck of a lot, well, it's still pretty good forward, but that's number 2. And then if you can get a bit more, that's number 1. So this one, don't necessarily have to hold on to these a whole lot, but I still like to just to make sure I'm kind of set in the right spot. And then from there, you're going to push back. Make sure when you're getting up to the top, you're not relaxing your abs all the way. You don't want to hyper extend your back. So just keep your core engaged and you're just pushing back, coming down, and should feel this in the low back a little bit. Again, if you feel any pain from that, not necessarily a good thing. We just want to feel those muscles that run up to lower back working. And then when you're done, always make sure with any of the machines before you adjust any of the levers or anything like that, the weight is set down already. So, you know, I don't want to be under tension here and pull this lever out because those weights are going to drop and I'm going to be embarrassed because a bunch of people are going to look because I just slammed a big heavy weight. So do that, set it back, and move on from there. The second one is going to be our rotary torso. So this basically, a lot of people call it like a Russian twist, right? It's basically a twist machine. So for this one, you're going to get in here, So this one actually, what I was talking about with the lever instead of the little thing you push in and out for the extra 5 pounds, this one explains it a little better because it shows that there's plus 5 pounds there. So push that down, it adds the 5 pounds. Bring it back up, it takes it away. So I'll just keep it on whatever weight's on there. So for this machine, you wanna make sure your butt's nice far back, hips are against the back pad. And this one works in 2 different directions. It's one exercise, but basically one way we're gonna be twisting to the left, other way we're gonna be twisting to the right, mostly for your obliques, but you should feel your rectus abdominis in here too. So to set this one, there's a little lever right here, because right now, regardless of which way I turn, there's gonna be some tension. So to set this, pull up on the lever, and then whichever side you wanna start with, you're gonna go as far over as you can comfortably without, torquing anything in your back. Sitting nice and upright, keeping your core engaged. I'm gonna wrap my arms around these pads and hold on to these handles if I can. If you have a little bit shorter arms, you can go a little lower because it doesn't force you to have to reach as far. And I've even seen some people, again, I'm pretty lanky, if you're not as lanky, you can't reach, you can actually just kind of hug these a little bit. But you want to make sure your whole upper body is basically kind of locked in place when you're there, so it's not moving independently, where we really want the movement coming from your torso. So I'm going to be here, core nice and engaged before I start twisting. 2 little tips I have for this one. Number 1, always keep your knees squeezing against this pad right here. Reason being is if I'm out here, I'm going to be using my legs a lot to push, versus when I'm here, I can't really use my legs to push because I'm squeezing tight, and that's going to just stabilize my hips so I can twist better. If you find you have a hard time with that, you can actually lift your legs right off the floor and squeeze. I don't suggest that one as much because it does put a bit more tension on. So just making sure you're giving a little squeeze. You're not trying to death grip this thing with your knees. Just squeeze a little bit, and then we're going to twist whatever distance you can do. And again, should twist to the side. Again, keeping the tension on your core the whole time, keeping it engaged. You don't want to just be flying like this. Squeeze nice and tight, big stretch, squeeze. However many you're going to do on that side. Then to go to the other side, you're just going to lift up the lever, spin all the way to the other side, and then do the same thing the other way. Now, one little tip I have, this will be for, this might be the only piece of equipment that actually goes for, yeah, because I think this is the only one that does single-sided stuff. Always try to start with your non-dominant side. Reason being is your non-dominant side is typically your weaker side. So with that, say you're trying to go to your max and you start with your strong side and you get, whatever, 15 reps at a really heavy weight and that's all you can do. Then you decide to go to your opposite side, your non-dominant side, and you can only get to 10 reps, let's say, because it's a little weaker or you're a little tired. Because again, this does work all the way across regardless of which side you start on. What that's going to do is it's always going to encourage your stronger side to get stronger because you're always doing a little bit more on that side. Just like most likely whenever you go up a set of stairs, you're always leading with your stronger leg. So that leg always gets just that little bit stronger. So it's always nice to start with your weaker side or non-dominant side. That way, if you get to a point where you can't do anymore, only do the same number of reps on the other side as well. That way, ideally, eventually, they start to even out over time. So that is the rotary horse. Next up, we got our lateral raises. So this is lateral raise, side delt raise, whatever you want to call it. This one does have a seat adjustment. The others really didn't. So most of these seats, actually this one's a little different, but this one just has a little lever underneath. Pull up on that and you can either push it down or up depending what height you want to be at. Ideally you're getting to a height where when you sit down in here, ooh, he's got some weight on there. Oops. The pads are just above your elbows is ideally where you want to be. So for me, I'm going to bring it up just a little bit more. There we go. So for this one is for your shoulders, your delts. All you're going to do, get in here, sit nice and upright. Just have your hands on the handles that are on the inside of here. You're not trying to again, death grip these and just struggle for your life to squeeze them as hard as you can. They're just there to kind of rest your hands so everything's nice and neutral. And from there, sitting nice and upright, you're gonna think that you're pushing your shoulders or your elbows, sorry, out to the side, which is gonna lift everything up and then back down. As you do more of those, you'll start feeling your shoulders working. One tip I have for that, or any side delt raise you might be doing, whether it's dumbbells, cables, or a machine, I find it better, and just kind of in terms of people's brains working well with this, don't think you're trying to go up with the weight, think you're trying to push out. Out has more of a tendency to just let you feel your shoulders working more, where if you're thinking up, sometimes your traps will kick in and you'll start kind of coming up really high like this, versus here really getting the delts to do that work. Yeah, that's it for the side delt or lateral raise machine. Then we have our seated row. So same setup with the seat adjustment here. There's a little latch under here, push it in, set it to whatever height you want. This one is a little more, it's just a different style, so it doesn't have extra help there. So just make sure you're holding the seat when you go to push that out, because it'll drop if you're not holding onto it, where that one has a little piston thing that won't let that happen. So this one, you want to set the seat at the height where your chest is basically against this pad. The other adjustment is how far out the pad goes. So if someone has shorter arms, nice close in. Someone has crazy long arms, way out here. I'm usually somewhere in the middle. Boom. Again, same idea with the extra 5 pounds of weight there if you need it. And with this one, we're just doing a seated row. So you want to make sure sitting up fairly upright. You just don't want to be hunched over like this. You also don't want to be really arched back like this, but different angles a little bit can change what muscles, well, how you're working the muscles back there, just like the different grips can change what you're doing. So here, I'm just going to do an overhand grip, but again, you can play around with overhand, parallel, overhand a little lower. You can do underhand if you want, whatever works for you. So here, you want to, again, chest against that pad. Big thing is when I go to row, I don't want to like push myself off the pad and do a big pull, because I'm just using a ton of momentum there. So chest against the pad, let those shoulder blades pull forward a bit, pull back. And what I'm thinking here, I'm not necessarily thinking I'm trying to pull the handles to my chest. I'm trying to think that I'm trying to squeeze my shoulder blades together and pull my elbows back behind my body and even together a little bit. Almost as if I was trying to, let's say trying to like touch my elbows to each other behind my back, which you shouldn't be able to do. If you can, you got some pretty wacky joints. But just that thought of squeezing those elbows together behind your back is going to get those shoulder blades squeezing. That's the seated row. Next up, this one does have 2 exercises with it. So this one is basically a bicep curl. It is basically a preacher curl, but just a bicep curl, and then a tricep extension. So it's set up for tricep extension right now, so I'll show you how to do that one. Once again, seat adjustment to the right height. Just like the low back extension we had, there's 2 settings for your tricep extension. And again, the arrow shows what direction you're going to be working. So there's kind of number 1 or number 2, depending on how much mobility you have in the elbows. And then when we go to the bicep, we'll set it to number 1 on that side. And again, it shows the arrow of what direction you're going to be working for that. But we'll go triceps first. A little lighter because I don't use this one very often, but it is a good machine. So what I see a lot of people doing with this one is they'll get in here, get whatever positioning they want to do, and end up sort of like this with the arms off the pad. The goal of this machine is, I'm going to actually move the seat down a little bit for me, is you want to keep the back of your arm right against the pad, just like a preacher curl would, which I'll show you afterwards. But you want your upper arms to be right against the pad, and then from there, you're just trying to straighten your arms down, keeping those upper arms against the pad the whole time, even as you're coming up here. All the way straight. Again, so my elbows aren't leaving the pad, they're staying on there the whole time. And I'm just trying to straighten my arms. And again, you can vary your grip a little bit. If you want to do an overhand one, you can. I don't know if this will work because people don't really do it, but underhand, oh yeah, there we go. You can do that too. And you should feel that in your triceps, which is the back of your arms. Then we'll adjust it for a preacher curl, which again is going to be for triceps, so this part of your arm. And again, same idea with this one. You want to keep the back of your arms plastered against this pad the whole time versus kind of like coming up and sort of ending up like pulling your elbows up here or having them come off in some way. So again, elbows and back of my arms are pushed against, coming down nice and low, get a good stretch, up, squeeze. Good hard squeeze at the top every time. Just like that. And again, you can vary how you're holding on to it. I feel like this would be weird, but we'll give it a go. Reverse grip. Yeah, it works. So those are 3 ways. Now, one thing I do want to point out with this, just because we do get, as trainers, we get this question a lot of, how do I get rid of this, right? We hear this all the time. People kind of flap their arm fat or muscle a little bit and say, hey, what do I do to get rid of this? Or sometimes it's just loose skin for that matter too. And a lot of people think if I just go and do all sorts of tricep exercises all the time, then I'll get rid of it. You can gain some muscle there by doing that, which can tighten things up a little bit. But in terms of fat loss, there's no real way to train a specific area for fat loss. So it's like people who say, I'm gonna do a ton of crunches and sit-ups so I can lose my belly. That doesn't really work. You're gonna work the muscles there, you're gonna strengthen them, you might get stronger abdominals, it might tighten up a little bit. But more so, you're gonna lose body fat in that area if you do good full body workouts that keep your heart rate up, keep you moving, you know, some cardio, some weight training, compound movements, which are like multiple movements at once, and a good, nutritious, healthy diet, of course, which again, we can help you with all that stuff. But I just want to point that out because I don't want to see people who are trying to get rid of this just hammer this machine for triceps for like days in a row. Because yeah, you'll gain some muscle, which is great, but you want to make sure that you're just doing it properly. That's it. Next one is our rear delt and pec fly. So I'm actually going to adjust this, and we'll start with the pec fly because that's a bit more common exercise. A lot of people know about it a bit more. So same thing with the seat. It can be adjusted to whatever height you like. And the adjustments for this one are at the top here. So you'll notice, I don't know if we can get in here, but there's a 0, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those all depend on what your mobility is in terms of the chest fly. So when we get to the rear delt fly, you're basically pretty much always going to be at 0. But then for the pec fly, which is a chest fly, you can be anywhere from, that would be 1, and then there's 2, 3, 4, 5. And that just all depends on how much mobility or flexibility you have in your chest muscles and your pecs, and if you have any shoulder issues and that kind of thing. So for me, I'm usually around a 3, depending on how the shoulder's feeling, sometimes a 2. 1 is pretty darn far back. I don't see too many people doing flies that far, but sometimes you will. So I'm just gonna go at a nice 3. And then even with this one, as you do more sets of it, say you're doing 3 or 4 sets, if you find you can get more range of motion out of it, you can always move it so it's a little more further back so you get a bigger stretch. That should actually be an okay weight. So for this one's for your chest, a little isolation exercise for it. So basically you have handles here. For this one, typically we're just gonna suggest you just hold on to the lower handles. You will see some people, if they just wanna hit certain parts of their chest, grab up here or even higher, which is gonna get a little more upper chest. I've even seen people grip it where their hands are down like this, which can just be more of a comfort thing as well. I typically go at the very bottom. And again, you're not trying to death grip these, you're just trying to give a good squeeze so they're comfortable in your hands. Keeping your shoulder blades here, chest up and out. You're gonna squeeze in, And I even suggest to people usually that they actually like push these together when you get them in there to get that little extra stretch. Big stretch back and in. One thing I do see a lot with this is a lot of the time, especially as people get tired, number one, either they're bending their arms and they're coming in like this, which is not working your chest that much. So that's a lot more kind of biceps, shoulder. So you want to keep, you don't want to lock your elbows all the way straight. We call it like a soft block where they're just bent a slight bit so there's no extra tension on that joint, and keeping that the whole time. So the movement's really coming from my shoulder joint with my chest doing the work versus like kind of movements happening that shouldn't really be happening. And another one we see sometimes, especially as people get tired or they're trying to go too heavy, is as someone comes forward, they'll either kind of push their body off the pad so they're out like this, or you'll see people sometimes like folding over like this, which again is really like incorporating your shoulders into the movement, and you're really trying to move your torso versus should be here, good chest squeeze, keeping those shoulder blades against that pad, chest up and out, where you're really just trying to isolate your chest versus kind of using a whole lot of other stuff, which can just put some strain on your shoulders more than anything. And then the other exercise this one does is your rear delt. So this one, most people definitely have to go lighter with this. So we adjust these back to 0 because we're actually going to turn around and face in on this one. I'm going to go a little lighter. Just because this is usually a pretty darn weak muscle group in terms of kind of rear delts, a little bit of traps in there too. But this is a great exercise for anyone who drives a lot, sits at a desk a lot, you know, kind of that common posture nowadays of instead of, you know, chest up and out, shoulders back, we kind of get that turned over, curled in a little bit because we're either typing a lot on our phones a lot, driving a lot, everything kind of comes over. So this is a nice one to help work all those upper back muscles to help with posture too. We use this a lot for people with posture that's not so great. So for this one, you're gonna be facing in. Again, chest up and out. You know, you don't want to be kind of folded over like this. Hands can either go overhand on here. I personally like to grab on here. I just find that it allows those shoulders to stay open versus naturally if you're going to kind of go overhand, your shoulders are going to want to close off a little bit. But you'll find if you do the overhand, if you get very good at feeling the proper muscles, that one you'll feel a bit more rear delt, which is the back of your shoulder. Whereas if you're going this one, you'll tend to feel a bit more traps, which is sort of more in the middle of your upper back. So I'll go rear delt this way because it's really what it's made for, more or less. Again, a little bit of a soft lock on your elbows again, so you don't want to be locked completely straight, just a bit of a soft one. And again, don't think you're going back because we don't want to end up here, which you can probably tell my shoulders are like really pushed forward right now. You want to be able to keep that chest out, and just like the shoulders before, just think you're pushing out. So I'm just trying to push out to the sides, keeping the tension on. And as you do a few of those, I'm just going to put one of these down so we point. You should be feeling this muscle working right here versus either kind of turning over and doing this, where now my shoulder, again, you can see my shoulders really folded forward, which will be a tendency if someone has kind of tight upper pecs or upper chest muscles, which again, a lot of sitting at a computer driving will kind of do that over time if we're not focusing on kind of the mobility there. So just chest up, pushing out to the sides. I'm trying to get that good squeeze just above your armpits at the back there. And then again, if you want to work a bit more of your mid-back, you can grab on here, and then you can be thinking a little more coming back, but still keeping my chest against the pad versus, again, folding over or trying to use too much momentum because it's too heavy for me and doing this kind of thing. Just nice and still. Squeezing those shoulder blades together, feeling the back of your shoulders work a bit there too. think that's it for that one, for those two exercises. Then we get to the machine that has 3 exercises on it. So this one is a multi-press. This one you can do basically a shoulder press, an incline chest press, which is going to be more for your upper chest, and then a flat chest press, which is more for the main pecs. So right now, I believe it's set for a shoulder press, but I'll show you the adjustments for the seat and the handles. So the seat has 3 adjustments. There's a little knob right here. All you do, push it down. So right now, all the way pushed back. Just make sure it clicks in so it doesn't click on you after you sit down, because it will throw you off a little bit. All the way back is how you set it for shoulders. And then there's about a halfway point right there. That's going to be for your incline chest press, which is your upper chest. And then down one more. I know it doesn't look flat, but that's for flat chest press, and it will feel flat once you get the handle set up properly. So that's the 3 setups for that. I'm just going to put it back for the shoulder press. And then what a lot of people don't notice as much is the adjustment for how high the handles start. So I'll put it at the top. So that's at the very top. Typically for most people, that's where you're going to want it for your shoulder press. And then to adjust it, you're basically just pulling this in almost like you would a brake on a bicycle, let's say. And then there's about 4 different adjustments. So that's number 2, it's a little lower. Number 3, a little lower. Number 4, a little lower. Obviously, if I'm doing shoulder press, this is not going to be ideal. That's more for when you set it up for your chest press when it's flat. So for shoulder press, usually one of the top 2. For me, I could probably come down one more and start my shoulder press here. What do we got here? Again, same setup for the weight. So with your shoulder press, again, keeping yourself nice and against the pad here. You can grab parallel grip if you find when you, so a lot of people will find if they go to do a shoulder press, it can be a little challenging to come out where your arms are parallel like, or perpendicular like this, back like this. And that'll have a lot to do with some of the stuff we just talked about with the last one, where the upper pecs are a little tight, maybe shoulders are a little tight. So if that isn't comfortable for you, where again, you're all the way out, if you're just trying to work the shoulders a bit and you're going to work on kind of your mobility in the shoulders and chest another time, then just go with the parallel grip. It's going to be a little easier on the shoulders. So you're here, push up and back down. And one thing I like to tell people with any kind of shoulder press is, again, instead of thinking you're just trying to get the thing to go up, you're thinking you're trying to squeeze this muscle. So I usually tell people, push up, but you're thinking you're trying to bring your bicep close to your ear. So it's this, and you're trying to squeeze that every time, versus just thinking up. Because up could get these raising up on you, it could do a lot of other stuff. So just try to think about the muscle you're working. So again, that's your shoulder press. You can do a parallel grip. You can do this grip, whatever's comfortable for you. And some of you might have even noticed, which we do see it a lot, and it's good because it can work your core a bit. Let's start this way, but you'll see some people sit this way on it too. That is an exercise. Don't think that person's crazy. It just requires a bit more core activation, because now I'm not against the brace the whole time. And you can push up this way too. And this one you're kind of pushing a little more forward as you go, where the other way you're coming backwards a little bit as you go. And then we'll show you the incline chest press. So for that, I'm going to bring this down a notch, maybe 2 once I get it down there. Bring this out to the halfway point. So now you'll see I'm a little bit more declined. So this is going to take the shoulders out a little bit more and just work my upper chest. As long as you're keeping yourself here, and either you're not lifting your hips way up, which will basically just make it a flat chest press, or I'm not kind of sitting forward like this, pushing up, which you can tell just by adjusting my upper back makes me pretty much perpendicular. So chest out, shoulders back, then I'm pushing up. And that'd be a bit more upper chest, as you can tell. It's not so much shoulders anymore. And then to go to the flat chest press, pull pull this out. Okay. And again, as you can tell, if we were to leave this set up where the shoulder press was, that's not a very low starting point. I'm like halfway to my full extension already. Pull this in, get to whatever point you can. I think that's the lowest. Actually, no, there's one more. So that's pretty darn low, but if I don't put it that low, chances are I'm missing a little bit of range of motion for what I can do. So I'll usually set it all the way down. First one will be a little tougher, but then I'm in the right position. And again, you can do a parallel grip here too. Whatever's more comfortable for your body to work the chest. So that is the multi-press. I believe that's the only one that you can actually do 3 things on. So feel free to play around with that one a little bit. Then we have the lat pull down and seated row. So this one is pretty darn self-explanatory. I'm just gonna put a little more weight on there just so I can work a bit. So first off, your lat pull down. I'll point this out to you often. This bar is sitting up top. That's just to store it out of the way. I have seen the odd time someone not really paying attention, just going in to do a lat pull down, and then it doesn't really do anything because it's resting up there. So just make sure taking it down, letting it hang, that way it's free. With this one, no seat adjustment. There is a little knee pad adjustment. So for me personally, you know, this would be too high for my knee. They're not anywhere near touching it. Where you want to have it just enough that it's keeping you nice and situated so you're not lifting up and down, and you can kind of keep a good base. I'd be one of the 2 in the middle, depending on how long your legs are. So I'm going to go up one. So for your lat pull down, so this is for your lat muscles, basically the ones that run right along the side of your body, just behind your rib cage, kind of behind and underneath your armpits. On this one you can play around. There's about 1 million grips you can do here. You can do a really wide grip, which again, ideally, if you think about it, the wider your grip, the wider you're trying to work your back, for kind of just an easy way to think about it, versus if I'm going kind of underhand narrow grip, it's going to work a bit more mid. So I usually tell people just grab just outside where the bar bends. I'll often put my thumbs right in there and then find that spot, unless I'm trying to work really far out or trying to work on, say, chin-ups to make them better as an accessory exercise. So wherever you're comfortable there, I'm just gonna grab on here. You want to get fairly underneath, so you don't want to be way back here, because now, quite honestly, it's almost turned into a row if I'm pulling this, right? Once I've kind of changed my body to the point where I'm basically just rowing this. If you're trying to work your lats, you want to get fairly underneath, and you want to think you're just pulling your elbows down and then trying to squeeze your body. So also I'm trying to touch my elbows to the side of my body as I pull down. Should feel that just in behind the armpits. So, and again, depending on what you're trying to work, you can go a bit further back, which is just going to get a bit more towards the middle of your back. But if you're trying to work just your lats, or as much your lats as you can, you want to make sure you're fairly upright. And again, you can change up your grip, you can do an underhand grip. But the big thing is making sure that chest stays up and out. Often, especially if someone gets tired, you'll see coming down to here, and then you'll kind of see people do this, or pulling down really low. There's no need to go that low. Your lats only work so far. You're not coming way down here. That you're starting to get your triceps involved. And again, the big thing with this is don't think you're pulling the bar to your chest. Think you're pulling your elbows back and down. Because if you think you're pulling the bar to your chest, often what's going to happen is your biceps are going to want to help kick in a bit, because you're just thinking pulling here versus the elbows pulling down and back. Then for a seated row, so I'm just going to get this out of the way so I don't hit my head on it. So this one has a handle here. The knee bar is not necessary for the seated row, so I usually just leave it where it is, because you're going to be sitting back a bit further. But there is 2 little pegs to put your feet, so that's there to help you stabilize your body. What I'll often do, just for a little more stabilization if I want, is I'll actually put my knees against the knee pads, not underneath, just against it, with my hands on the pegs, or my feet on the pegs, just so my body's nice and solid. So again, very similar to the seated row we did earlier, except this one, obviously you don't have the chest pad, so it's a little more up to you to keep your body fairly still. Again, you don't want to see people like rocking and using a ton of momentum like this. Again, you can move a little bit to get a little stretch in that mid back, but then you're trying to keep the movement coming from your back versus, you know, pulling like this. Or at very minimal, if you are someone who's trying to get a bigger range by getting a stretch out of the mid back and then big squeeze back, just make sure you're not doing it too quick, because that's where you'll see people trying to do it too heavy. They're swinging like this, where I'm using a lot of my core and low back to move this thing versus keep it nice and still. And you're trying to get that squeeze between your shoulder blades, which again, you're thinking pulling those elbows back and together a little bit, like you're trying to get a good squeeze there. Those are the two for that one. We're almost there. We're getting into the leg stuff now. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leg machines, and then we'll call it a day. So it's getting a little long, but that's okay. Okay, so this one is the inner outer thigh, or adductor abductor. So we'll try and speed these up a little bit, but so this one, we have a little adjustment lever right here. So more or less, this one, you're either closing your legs or opening your legs. Which closing, you're gonna work your adductors. Opening, you're gonna work your glutes and your abductors. So what we'll do, because it's set here, we'll start you with adductors. So my suggestion to get into this thing fairly safely, pull up on the lever. You're gonna bring it all the way in. And so we're gonna do the adductors first. So when we bring our legs together. So for that, you're gonna be in here. Pads spun out because they can spin either way. So obviously if I'm pushing in, I want the pads there. If when we go to our abduction, you're gonna want the pads on the outside. Once you're there, sitting nice and upright, pull this pin up, keep it pulled up until you get to a point where you can comfortably bring your legs out. For me, it's not very far. But what I'll do sometimes, because if I only go to there, I do have more range that I can get to. It's just hard to get it out there. Often what I'll do, prop myself up a bit, just to the next level and then get into place. And I can still comfortably be in this position. It's just hard to get there without doing that. So from here, all I'm thinking is I'm squeezing my knees together. Good squeeze. Back. So obviously adductors, groin is what you're gonna feel here. Making sure you're moving nice, slowly. Don't just let this thing fall out on you, because that's just dangerous. And again, this one is probably the one we see it the most, where when someone's finished, they won't 100% let the weights rest, and they'll try and pull this pin out and the weight will fall. So make sure you're all the way out and you can see the weights sitting on each other. Then you can pull the pin up and now you're free. Then we're gonna switch you to your abduction, which again is gonna get your glutes going a bit more. So some people like to sit a bit more forward when they're doing this one, which is completely fine. Still works your glutes all well. You're just gonna leave this set at 0 here. And then from here, I'm just pushing out and letting it come back in. Again, when you come in, try not to let the weights touch. You wanna keep that tension on the muscles. And I'm just pushing out to the sides, and try to make sure you're pushing with your knees. You're not like pushing out with your feet. You really want the upper legs to be, or the knees to be where you're pushing out from to get those glutes going, like so. And again, when you're done, make sure it's resting all the way. I mean, technically you don't have to lift this up anymore if you just want to leave it, and that one's good. This one's a pretty darn easy one. Leg press, pretty self-explanatory. So you have your seat height adjustment. So depending on how tall you are, how long your legs are, how long your femurs are, how you fit in there. This one, getting into the leg press. That weight should be fine. Making sure when you're doing a leg press that your hips and butt are staying planted against the back pad, like your lower back is against here. I'll explain what I mean in a second. So before I put any tension on, I want to make sure that I'm nice and against this pad. Depending on how high you put your legs is going to work muscles a little differently. So the lower you go, in terms of where my feet are on here, which you still want your full foot on there. The lower I go, the more quad I'm going to be working. The higher I go, the more hamstring glute I'm gonna be working. And then also you can play around with how far apart your legs are, a little bit of angles. Again, everyone's gonna be a little different based on how their legs fit into their hips. But easy way to put it is usually about hip width apart, usually a slight outturn of the legs and of the feet, and usually somewhere around the middle of the pad, right? And that's kind of gonna get everything. One thing I like to make sure for people that they know is whatever angle your feet are on, your thighs should be moving on that same angle. So if my feet are dead straight, my thighs should also be moving dead straight. If my feet are turned out, my thighs should also be coming out. Because if you're not, if my, I mean, you're gonna be able to tell this looks bad right away, but if my feet are angled out and my knees are in, this obviously does not look in any way good for my knee joints. And the same with, I mean, this would be an awkward one, you don't see it much, but say my feet are straight and my knees are, it'd be weird to be super out like this, but that one's a little more acceptable, but still kind of weird. So just trying to make sure, and I tell this for people with deadlifts, with squats, with a lot of leg exercises, pretty much all of them, whatever angle your foot is on, you ideally want your thigh on about that same angle, give or take, pretty close to that. And again, with the leg press, what I was talking about, I'm gonna do this because it's just a lightweight, but you wanna make sure that you don't set the seat so far forward that, I'm just gonna make sure my leg's out of the way, that when I'm coming back, instead of my low back staying nice and pressed against this, I don't want it to be like scooching forward, because at that point, I'm no longer getting the movement out of my hips, it's now transitioning to my low back, which you really don't want, because that's where you're gonna put tension on your spine and things aren't gonna work properly. So really making sure core is engaged and I'm keeping my back nice and flat against the pad versus letting things kind of curl underneath where attention is going to go into your low back. And then just quickly, another exercise you can do on here is just a calf press. Please no calf jokes. You're going to get the balls of your feet on there. Again, you're going to basically just let your ankles flex back and then push out with the balls of your feet and trying to push out nice and far, and that'll work your calves, which as you can tell I'm on here, just enormous. And you're just working your calves like so. And again, just making sure, put this down before you try and change any weights or anything like that. That is the leg press. We do have a plate loaded version, which I'll show you on another day. It's literally the exact same thing, just with plates instead of a selectorized machine. This one is our glute extension. So there are a few things with this. There's really no adjustments other than the weight. This one is to work your glutes. You'll work your hamstrings a bit too. Glutes are your butt cheeks. And you'll work your hamstrings a little bit too. Pretty self-explanatory, or there are literally cutouts for footprints on the machine. So you're basically gonna put your feet on the footprints. You have the handles here, you have your forearms on the pad. Big thing here is you wanna make sure, number one, I'm not like curled under really far like this, that my back is fairly neutral, core is engaged. You're gonna put one foot on here, and then pushing up and back, and I'm just trying to squeeze my glute, which again is my butt cheek. I'm gonna angle out a bit better. Oop, there we go. So the big thing you wanna watch here, which I'll see a lot of people doing if they don't have the best glute activity, is instead of keeping the body nice and still, nice and neutral, you'll see a lot of people really flexing their low back like this, tricking themselves into thinking they're going really high. And really using their glute, where that one you're just flexing your spine a ton, which is not going to be great for it. You know, our spines are meant to move, but not necessarily under tension with weight. So really try and keep your body nice and still, and all you're trying to do, I'll do this side again just to show, is I'm trying to squeeze my butt cheek. So I'm trying to push out. Naturally that's going to come up a little bit. I should feel a good squeeze in my glute every time. And again, you'll probably feel some hamstring there too, just because it's going to do some work. Again, that's one of those ones where start with whatever side you think is the weaker one, then go to the stronger one, just so you're trying to keep things in the right range of strength. Then we'll get to the lying hamstring. So, this is a lying hamstring curl. So the only real adjustment on this one is depending on how long your legs are. If you pull out this little tab, you can go for if you have fairly short legs or a little bit longer. Even though I have long legs, I like to keep it on the short one. I just find I feel a little bit better. With this one, it is a little tricky sometimes. You want to make sure you get your hips lined up so your core can stay engaged and your low back is staying still. So what I'll tend to do is tell people you just want your thighs to be flat on this pad. Wherever that makes you have to get on this pad. So for me, about there. And again, you want to make sure, again, this should feel nice and neutral. My low back should be still. Thighs are against here. There's a couple handles you can hold on to at the front if you just want to tense up a little bit. And then from there, all I'm doing, curling my legs as far as I can. Slowly back down. Again, try not to let the weights smash together, but you want to get a big stretch. And up. Again, this is one where sometimes people say they feel it in their low back. And often that's because the hamstrings aren't doing all the work. So they're kind of like flexing their low back and like moving their hips around a bit. You want to make sure all this hips, low back stays nice and still. You're just bending the legs. The only thing that should be moving is the knee joint. Which hopefully that's what it looks like. And then the final machine, which has a million adjustments. So it is set up for leg extensions right now, which is for your quads. So I'll show you that one first. So first off, depending on your height, this is your adjustment. So if you're quite short, all the way forward, quite tall, all the way back. For me, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm usually on a 4 or a 5. The easiest way to set that up is once you get situated and you're seated, there's a little silver circle right here. If you're in the right spot, your knees are basically lined up with that circle because that's where the machine moves. So that's where your knees should be because that's where your knees move as well. So for me, I'm pretty much in the right spot. So first off, you'll notice here, there are 3 different adjustments for when we are bringing the machine up, which will be our quad extension. And that just depends on how far your knees can bend and also how much of a range of motion you want to work. So number 1 is where I suggest if you can get in there, if you don't have any knee issues that are preventing that. But if you do, pull this lever out, you can go to number 2, which again, obviously a little further out. And then number 3, even further out. So it all depends what you're trying to work, what range of motion you have. But for most people, again, sometimes you'll have to kind of move your legs out of the way, get it into one, then slide your feet in between or ankles in behind. And then you can also adjust how high on your leg this pad is. So for most, I usually say number 2 is about the middle because that, again, it all depends on how long your legs are. For me, number 2 is right. Number 3 will push it a little further down your leg. So now it's pretty much at my ankle, but if I come all the way up, it starts to get a little far. Number 2, you see it come up a little bit. And number 1 brings it up really high. And again, that all just depends on how long this part of your leg is where you want that to be. So for me, it's either 2 or 3. I'll just keep it at 2 because it's simple. And then from there, with this one, you're basically just trying to straighten your legs all the way. So most pieces of equipment and most exercises, we tell you not to lock out any joint. This one is literally the exception where you want to lock out your knee joint. So you want to all the way straight, good hard squeeze at the top. You should feel these muscles working and then back down. And again, trying not to let the weights rest, right? You don't want to hear this every time. You should keep that tension on, so you're up. What I like to suggest to people too with this is make sure you're feeling everything the same in both legs. Because again, sometimes one leg will do a bit more work than others. Sometimes naturally we have one leg that likes to kind of be turned out a little bit or turned in a little bit. So just play around with angles. And again, you can hit parts of your leg muscles different, parts of your quads differently based on the angle. So if I turn my legs out a little, I'm going to feel that more on the inside. Again, I don't suggest this, but if I turn my legs in, I'll feel it more on the outside, but ideally you're pretty much straight. I'm trying to feel it all the way. Should feel inside, outside, and especially right here. And a good squeeze at the top every time. Then we go to a seated hamstring curl. So for that one, the big lever, if everything else should remain the same based on your legs. So pull that big lever out, and you'll notice there are 3 settings for hamstring curls, just like there were for quads. So number 3 doesn't put it quite so high. Number 2, go higher. Number 1, even higher. I like to go number 1 because I have that mobility. On this one, you're gonna slide your legs in between the 2 pads. So one thing is get it set up before you put your legs in between, because naturally it's gonna be more challenging if your legs are in between while you're sitting it because you're pressing on it. So again, nice and upright, core engaged. And this one, now I'm trying to pull just like the lying hamstring curl, I'm trying to bend my knees. I'm pulling in as far as I can. Good squeeze right there. Again, coming out, again. Ideally not letting those weights touch, so you don't want to hear this every time. Shouldn't hear those weights touch at all unless it's just a little tap. If you go too far one time, you're trying to bend those knees and basically get a good squeeze. Anytime hamstring curls, I usually tell people, try to touch your heels to your butt is the idea. You're trying to curl under nice and far. And then when you're done, either you can just slide out this way or bring this back down, put it wherever you like, and then slide out. So that is my little demonstration of all our Precor equipment. It was a little lengthy, but again, there's a lot of different adjustments you can make on these things. Hopefully I gave you some good little tips and tricks to feel things a little bit better. If anyone has any questions, feel free to comment in the comments, whether this is on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We'll post on our website too. So yeah, if you have any questions, reach out, put something in the comments. We'll answer them as best we can. And hopefully we get back in here soon and get you guys using these machines. Thanks so much.